Hi everyone, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Holding Court with the Empress of West Hollywood. My name's Enoch Miller. You're Empress of WeHo. We're so excited to have you with us today. We want to give a special thank you to our amazing producers, GayLifeLA.com, as well as Kings Road Apartment Homes for the amazing space you see here today. And I want to welcome our very special guest, Oliver Mayer. Thank you. He is a Los Angeles playwright, as well as the professor of dramatic writing at USC School of Theatre.
That's a mouthful.
That is a lot. I mean, that must be a lot of, like, what do you have to break that out? A lot of little letters to go in with that.
Associate Dean of Faculty, Associate Dean of Strategic Initiatives, Associate Professor of Dramatic Writing.
So
I could go on.
Just a little bit. He's only been there for just a while now, and you're a teacher there with tenure, and you've author of over 30 different plays.
I know, I started young.
That's like an incredible feat. Let's go way back to the beginning. To little Oliver, born in Hollywood,
yes.
Here, so local, LA local, grew up in Studio City, and it's so funny, you never hardly ever meet an LA local, typically they're transplant from somewhere else and doing that. Growing up, what kind of do you see is the biggest difference for Los Angeles comparatively between when you were a child to today in 2018?
That's such a great question, and it's changed a lot.
Yeah.
But underneath it all, you know, I think some of the provincial qualities that I grew up with are probably still here. You know, you can get something to eat now after 11 o'clock.
Yeah,
which is the best thing. Traffic is worse.
Yeah, traffic is definitely worse.
Air quality is getting worse.
Really? Okay.
I mean, when I was a kid, I remember, I can't tell you how many days they wouldn't let me outside because the air quality was so crappy in the valley.
Well, okay, first of all, it's the valley. So let's get that one first and foremost. But yeah.
I would say that LA, you know, we're finding ourselves. And maybe we're putting ourselves, of course, on stage. I'm in the theater, but on screen. And maybe just almost in the mirror, we're beginning to see who we are and to actually value that.
Okay.
I would say for my youth, you know, even though we had a really cool artistic scene here and really great pop music and great fashion, we were always looking to New York. And I think it was a few years ago that Paris, I guess, you know, the top of the heap, Paris said that LA was the most interesting city of the 21st century. Wow. And I think that has maybe affected us. Hopefully our heads aren't too big about it, and rather we're just gonna like really follow our own lead and be true to ourselves as Angelinos and have fun doing it, and that maybe we really will be that city that Paris thinks we are.
So another compare and contrast question I wanted to ask, because New York is so vastly looked at as the place when it comes to theater and stage and everything like that, and Los Angeles is more television, film. Do you see the LA scene becoming more robust in its theater scene and actually coming into its own and being competitive in a sense with New York? I mean, obviously we'll never be Broadway and everything like that, but do you see Los Angeles becoming more distinct in its theater community and culture?
I do.
Okay.
And I agree we'll never have a Broadway, and maybe that's a good thing.
Okay.
Nothing against Broadway except maybe the $300, $400 prices per ticket.
Right.
And the very expensive drinks at the intermission. I think that we are robust is the right word. There's just a lot going on. You know, a lot of it is crap. Yeah. But a lot of it's crap in New York too.
True.
And you know, crap is in the eye of the beholder too.
Yeah.
So I don't want to put anybody down individually. I mean, if you have the gumption to put a play on, God love you. And I am so grateful for every audience member, I mean it, who leaves their flat screen wherever it is and, you know, makes the trek through traffic to come see a play. I think that, you know, these are the little miracles that keep the theater alive. But LA is really exciting. There's so much going on every week.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, and we have really, really fine writers, and we have the best actors in the world.
Yeah,
for
I
obvious
definitely
reasons.
agree. I definitely agree.
So, and then I just think that, you know, because our food's so good, and because, you know, maybe all the languages that we deal with, that the material on stage is just richer. It's more fun. You know, dare one say it's sexier.
Yeah, it's for sure. No, it definitely is, and it really is. When people look at the U.S., they look at California especially, and then Los Angeles second to that, of a place where just, I mean, it's kind of a clash of culture from all over the world. I mean, you have little Ethiopia to little Taiwan to little Armenia to all these other different places. and especially the different cultures when it comes to the Latino community, African American community, and there's just such a diversity that kind of overlaps and overlays on top of each other. It really is just such a fun mismatch of all these different communities that kind of overlay and really create the structure of Los Angeles on that community aspect.
I agree.
And so you attended Cornell, Oxford, and Columbia universities. You know you were a professor when you loved to go to school. And
I was a lousy student in high
really?
school. Yeah, I picked it up somehow around junior, senior year, I don't know. Something clicked, because I was not a good student.
And had you always wanted to be in theater or doing plays? Was that always a passion for you?
Not really.
Okay.
I think I was pretty, I didn't have an idea of what I wanted to do. But when I was 13 years old, my parents took me to see Zoot Suit, the original.
The original.
Just dates me and tells you how old I'm 53. But I was 13, so that was 40 years ago. And I remember I was a punky little 13. I had pimples. I was a young boxer. I was angry with everybody, whatever that was, 7th or 8th grade. And I remember just as the lights were going down, I was angry about something. I almost got out of my seat. And then Eddie James almost came out, these beautiful women came out, and the music started, and Switchblades came out. I'm like, I like this. And I can draw a straight line from that moment to sitting with you.
Wow.
I mean, the way I felt that day is the way I want to feel about the work I'm doing, the one that we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
And every time I go to the theater, either to see someone else or myself, I hope that I feel that my heart jumps out of my throat.
And it's great, especially, theater is supposed to move you in such a passionate way, and really supposed to invoke emotion and a feeling and a response, and it's really supposed to just engage the audience as much as you're being engaged there on stage for everyone else there watching. So it's, I love theater, and I definitely love just, the way you get to do that tit on tat between audience and an actor and actress. So it's really amazing to see. So you're going through school, everything like that. You come back to Los Angeles, and then you worked as literary manager for Mark Taper Forum, and you worked on a lot of really amazing plays out through that. You did Tony Kushner's Angels in America, Terrence McNally's Masterclass, and then came to your own for Blades to the Heat. What was it like working for Mark Taper Forum and really kind of getting to work with some of these amazing people in the theater community?
It was the ultimate education. When I arrived at the Mark Taper in 1989, Oscar Eustis, who now runs the Public Theater, arrived with a very slim volume, as slim as that, which was Angels in America, which eventually became a 7-hour, I don't know how many 100-page book.
It's just a whole,
I think it was like 30 pages.
It's like an encyclopedia now. It's like massive.
Yeah, so it was amazing to see that grow.
Okay.
And because I, at the time, worked for Oscar, I was able to read the drafts.
Mm-hmm.
And then we do readings, and all these amazing actors who are now on TV, and some of whom have passed away. But just like really legendary people were involved all along the way. So it's kind of like a master class.
Okay.
Because I think that Tony Kushner's a master. Terrence McNally's a master.
Definitely. For sure.
But I just kind of sat. I was around. I worked. I made coffee. I made runs to LAX. But I also was involved in the literary kind of, pushing the paper, making sure that new scenes got to Gordon Davidson, the director.
Wow.
Sometimes I got to be on the inside with dramaturgical sessions, and all of that has kind of been filed away from me. So now when it's my turn, I can remember those moments, occasionally remember what not to do when some of the explosions occurred, and boy did they.
I can imagine.
And then often just remember, my better angels, what would Tony do? What would some of these really great people do when the pressure's on?
Yeah.
And the first thing I remember to do is just breathe.
Yeah. Definitely,
boy.
That's half the battle right there, is taking a step back from it all.
The last couple of days has been about breathing.
Right, exactly.
But I got so much from particularly that Angels in America experience, and I think that when we put it on at the Taper stage, and then I got to see it on Broadway, I thought that the pinnacle was at the Taper, and it doesn't come around that often.
No.
I've been in the theater long enough to realize, I guess it was Lin-Manuel Miranda's Hamilton that's been our generation's
Yeah,
moment.
for sure.
hopefully there's room for more. But it feels to me like when you kind of reach the mountaintop, you got to really survey the scene, because it doesn't happen that often that you get that high.
Yeah, it's very true. And I mean, again, especially, I mean, the playwright community and anything when it comes to stage and theater, I mean, it is a very tough crowd. And the critics are ruthless on a lot of those. And
so I don't read them.
Yeah, though, I mean, they will tear people for filth on those things. And had you always wanted to go into it as an actual playwright, or did you initially wanted to be on stage in the spotlight and everything like that? Did you go into it saying, yes, I would love to actually write the plays instead of performing them?
So I'm a person, I have a mother who wanted me to be an actor.
Okay.
How many people can say that?
Not very many. Unless you live in LA, then most of your parents probably did.
My mother was steering me towards acting.
Wow.
And honestly, I think I'm an energetic actor, but I'm not a very deep actor.
Got it.
So I did a few years of acting. I wanted to sing.
Okay.
I actually have a pretty decent operatic voice, or at least I used to when I was a teenager. So I thought, well, I'll sing. But it's really hard.
Yeah.
I think it's harder than writing.
Yeah.
And at a certain moment, I just knew I had to choose, and I chose writing.
Wow.
So I haven't really veered from that choice in 33 years.
Wow, and that's amazing. And again, I mean, writing in and of itself is no easy feat, because again, you're writing from each character's perspective. You're also writing in the blocking, you're writing in what the emotion is, you're writing the reactions, the facial, I mean, you're having to break down the entire human concept from face to emotion to internal concept and all this stuff. So I feel that, I mean, I don't know how a lot of people, and especially the creative imagination of having to come up with this entire story. I know you pull your subject kind of topics are typically based on historical facts.
Often.
And mostly historical, like, or some sort of historical event. But what kind of helps you develop a play, or when you're sitting down to kind of put like pen to paper and come up with a concept? How do you kind of branch out and go, this is what I want to do to accomplish a full script?
I have a little rhyme that keeps me on track where
Okay.
I say history and mystery.
History, mystery, okay.
So the history aspect, I mean, we can define history any number of ways.
Yeah.
It's fact, or I don't know, the winner's story, or data, events. But you only get so much when you read a history book or you get that documentary. And my curiosity naturally often takes me to think about the main players, but maybe some of the people who were around the main players.
Okay.
I wonder, what was it like at that moment? Because you and I know that, let's say today turns out to be, for some reason, a very historical day.
Okay.
Well, we didn't know that.
Right.
We just dealt with LA traffic and the heat and the air conditioning and whatever we're doing tonight. We're just living our lives.
Right.
And God hope it's not 9/11, but if 9/11 were to happen again, we are not necessarily prepared, even if we think we are.
Right.
So that fascinates me, to put people in perspective in historical moments of historical consequence, and to see who they really were in those moments. As in the play that we're going to talk about, Members Only, which takes place in 1982, which is this fabulous moment in American history that kind of looks like 2018, with a lot of exploration, non-binary exploration, great music and culture and fashion, and everyone's on the precipice of an AIDS scourge that they don't see coming.
Yeah. And
that is an extreme example of the way I like to look at history and look into the unknown, the mystery. To look and see, and for me, I define the unknown not simply as what we don't know, but maybe what we don't know yet.
Yeah, and I really like that concept, because it is so true. You don't understand a moment in history at that moment, because it's going to be something in hindsight. You're going to be looking back on it and going like, oh wow, I can only imagine what those people were thinking. And like you said, it was just a regular Tuesday or a regular whatever day that day was. No one's ever in their mind thinking, oh, like the example of the World Trade Center is falling down. I mean, no one at 9/11 was thinking, oh, today someone's going to run a plane into 2 buildings and completely shatter American perception.
Change everything.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's so true, and I love that idea of really kind of delving into people's environment at that time and really kind of pulling from, like, what would someone be thinking in that day, in a moment in history, before that moment's actually transpired. So it's an amazing thing to think about, and really kind of puts you in perspective on how you develop that character.
And then my natural sense of politics wants to take me into, looking at Latino characters,
Yeah.
African American characters, Asian characters, and again, people who identify in other ways based on their color,
Right.
based on their sexual behavior, based on other identifiers, so that they get a chance to be on stage too.
Mm-hmm.
And my director's been saying this recently, I think it's true, that when I write plays like this, there are no conversations. Everything is dialogue. Everything's intentional, and everything is like, there's a lot of dynamism in that kind of writing, because you're trying to grasp a moment, but knowing that it's kind of slipping away as you're doing it.
Yeah. Oh, you're with a professor when you start using vocabulary words. Ladies and gentlemen, word of the day, dynamism. Okay. So let's go to Blade to the Heat and really talk about kind of what right before members only, and kind of give people the foundation of kind of how this starts out. So basically you have your main protagonist, which is Pedro Quinn. And he's a boxer. He's an introverted loner, and he kind of goes into this middleweight boxing match against the reigning middleweight champion, who's Matakia Decima. And so basically, they have this like epic fight, and he ends up beating him. And of course, the first reaction that he starts getting from all these other different people is that like, oh, he must be a little bit soft, aka queer. And so, which kind of in turn turns him into this bitter, kind of angry character and starts lashing out. And then Pedro goes in and is also dealing with some initial issues with this other fighter named Wilfred Vinal. Vinal, sorry.
I know, Vinal is the way it sure looks.
And he then accuses him of being gay and publicly scorns him for the same thing. And then he doesn't even realize, though, that Pedro is actually having issues internally with potential identity and not knowing if he is or if he isn't. And this kind of turns into this whole conflict between kind of these three. And then he ends up having a friend where those two get close. So, so with a little bit of that, kind of walk us through how you came up with this concept, and then kind of the mains and how all those different relationships work.
So when I was living in the Valley as a teenager, I was a boxer.
Okay.
I boxed for about 3 years and took on all comers. Just really, I didn't have an amateur career to speak of, but I fought in the gym a lot, so I met a lot of guys.
Gotcha.
And the showers were really skeevy, and it was just a weird time to be coming of age.
Yeah.
With all of these, fighters of one kind or another, and so I got really into boxing, and I heard some stories about a boxer who had been outed as a gay man in the 1960s.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, that would be really tough.
Especially that kind of culture with, it's very manly.
Yeah, that machista thing is real even into 2018.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And here I was in the late 70s boxing and trying to figure out who I was, thinking about someone 15 years earlier who got outed and ended up killing his opponent in anger. And so I thought, wow, there's a story. And I forgot about it for a while until it came back. And I wrote the play quickly, and the first reading we had in Hollywood was the same day that Magic Johnson came out HIV positive.
Oh, wow.
So, these weird moments in time that were certainly becoming some kind of constellation about an American consciousness, an American kind of dealing with sexuality, and particularly homosexuality, and all the mistakes we've made.
Right.
And all of the misinformation that's gone around.
Right. Well, and then especially with the surgence of the HIV epidemic, and then everything coming right after that.
People probably don't remember that Magic Johnson, people just shunned him.
Yeah.
He had to leave the NBA, and when he returned, the referees wore latex.
Oh yeah, it was
gloves.
Total pariah. It was
Karl Malone, if people remembered, refused to shake his hand.
Yeah.
They thought if they breathed on him, they'd get AIDS.
Yeah. They were scared to share the same, like you said, the same air with him because of it.
It was ridiculous, and obviously people who knew anything knew that Karl Malone and others were crazy, but we also knew that kind of ignorance and misinformation may not have entirely been their fault.
Right.
It was a campaign of misinformation.
Right.
And fear.
Yeah.
So this, I guess, is the point, that I decided to write a play about someone who really meant no harm to anyone, just trying to do his job, just trying to find himself.
Right.
But fear and misinformation and a culture of machismo, a culture that is kind of either or, caveman, binary, would actually wreck a man's life and maybe kill a man's opponent and cause regret and guilt that would last a lifetime. And there's got to be something we got to do about that. You see a tragedy on stage, and hopefully you check yourself as an audience and maybe think twice about some of those really extreme views. I don't think maybe our listeners have them, but people in this city still have some of these extreme views.
No, exactly, and a lot of people don't realize, especially Latino culture and that community. It's a lot of my family's very the same way with that on that side of my family, and it's very much. When it comes to that culture, especially very, very Catholic, typically, it's the very kind of very either or binary. They choose that kind of thing, and if you choose to identify as anything other than heterosexual, you are very quickly disowned and removed from the equation of the family, and it is a very big concept, especially obviously back in the early 70s and anything to do with that, but even now today, almost 8,000 youth that are homeless in Los Angeles, a decent percentage of that is LGBT youth.
That's right.
So it's a huge epidemic that a lot of people don't realize that continues today, even as a progressive a community as Los Angeles as it is. And kind of describe why, obviously you have a Latino heritage and everything with that, but why did you choose to kind of combine the two and really focus on that type of culture and that demographic between the either or and everything with that?
I think I made it even more difficult, and I think you know what I'm talking about, because the man's name is Pedro Quinn.
Right.
So he's Mexican American.
And Irish as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Irish and Mexican, in a sense, damned by both houses.
Right. Neither one nor the other.
Brown and white.
Yeah.
And I'm Oliver Mayer. You can't even tell with my name.
Yeah.
But I'm half Mexican, and I know you've got
quarter Hispanic.
So that I think those of us who have Latin roots, but maybe don't feel completely Latinx, Latino, and maybe a lot of this has a lot to do with the Spanish language, and some of the intricacies of a Latino culture, maybe Catholicism. Some of these things keep us from being able to really identify and really feel part of the family.
Right.
And it comes up whenever there's any real stress, too.
Definitely.
I can't tell you, particularly early in my career, when I would try to get together with other Latino artists, and if there was any kind of problem, they might try to cut me away based on my last name, or based on the fact that my skin is not particularly exactly. And so I put that all on the character.
Wow. And
so I wanted that character to really be what I call now he's a lonely warrior.
Okay.
Because he really is. He's not just a fighter, but I think he's a fighter for good in this play. Because even though he's not a particularly well-educated person, I think he has a good heart, and he has love in his heart. And he's trying to do the right thing in a really complicated American landscape. In the first play, Blade of the Heat, in the late 50s, early 60s, when Liberace was straight.
Right.
When it was
so funny.
when there was no gay identity.
Right.
And here's a young man just trying to find his way. And even as he innocently is trying to maybe go from boy to man, he has people around him who realize that if they out him, that they can further their own careers.
Which is so a debasing human characteristic, that to belittle someone else in order to further your own whatever agenda.
Not that anyone has ever experienced that in their lives.
Never, no, not at all. Not that anyone hasn't tried to do it to someone else. We are sometimes always very selfish people, and it's always so it's scary to see the lengths some people would go to. And then for the LGBT component, and what was that initially always in the forefront of your mind, wanting to bring something like that to the main character, or was it just kind of in general wanting to kind of tie that in due to the fact that it is very kind of stereotypical of first of all that type of culture, to kind of either pull out, if you're a little bit softer, you're a little bit more of a sissy, you're a little bit more queer in a sense.
I think I always knew that this character was
was going to be identified.
Although when I first was writing it, it was a different time in the 90s, and I was a younger person, and I always kind of like left it open. We'll decide with the director. And also, honestly, I guess that is political too. I think even as a younger man, I wanted to give a little leeway to the audience and the actor, because I don't know that anyone is just who they are.
Right.
I do believe in nature, but I certainly believe in nurture.
Right.
And I also believe that we ought to give ourselves a second chance, depending how we feel.
And especially now, and especially I've seen this so much more nowadays too, the fact that identity is becoming such a non-binary kind of a construct. It's not necessarily gay, straight, bi, lesbian. It's a little bit, some people identify one way or another. Even bisexuality now is becoming more prevalent, and it's more people are kind of choosing based on an emotional connection than just a sexuality identity kind of thing. So it is becoming a little bit more not completely like yes, no. So I like that idea of leaving it more open, especially in today's community. I think more people can relate to them still discovering and figuring things out and kind of playing with the idea of what might I be? Am I like this? Do I like this? Don't I? And kind of really trying to self-discovery in a sense.
I think that's the healthy way to go. Yeah. I remember, again, I don't know why I keep talking about my teenage years.
What's your formative years?
I remember being in phys ed, PE, and sweaty out there in North Hollywood somewhere, and having to stand in line, and they gave us one of the very first sort of forms to identify who you are.
Really?
And back then it was basically like black,
white, Hispanic,
or Asian. I think there were four. You know? And I remember a young man in front of me.
Only here, right? Only here. Asian for only here.
I'm from Chicago. It's black or white.
It's crazy to think that we were like 13 years old, and we had to look at this, and that thing that we checked would define us.
Yeah.
And sometimes limit us. And I remember a young man who had knocked me down playing football. I was a lousy football player, and he was bigger than me anyway. And he knocked me down pretty hard. He's a black guy. Mm-hmm. And then we had to say what we did was horrible.
Oh, that's so weird that they made you say it.
Yeah, this young black guy had put white because his mother was white, even though he was of a darker shade. And I remember the entire, 50 kids laughed at him.
Wow.
And this kid had just knocked me down, and I was scared of him. And afterwards, I wasn't as scared. But then I also thought, that was really weird.
Yeah.
And I still think about it, and what is that? Like a long time ago. But I know that boxes and categories can limit people. Yeah. They can hurt people. They're for other people's benefits, certainly not for our own. And
especially for the people of color community, I mean, it's very they start especially putting those labels on you, either black, Hispanic, Asian, anything like that. I mean, it really
there's an economic imperative.
Exactly.
It affects how we vote or don't. In the end, it's where you live. It's all this stuff that's so deep, much less who you decide to partner with.
Right.
Because you like to think the whole world is out there for you, but in the end, you do choose your tribe.
Yeah.
And hopefully you get to choose your tribe. Your tribe isn't chosen for you.
Yeah. I was actually just watching a video of a young gay couple that was challenged by BuzzFeed to do a week challenge of showing PDA in different public locations around Los Angeles. And the fact that they were so terrified to not ruffle any feathers, and all the different examples BuzzFeed was giving of other instances where someone had either been a victim of a hate crime or anything like that in 2016, 2017, 2018, and how that, based on just someone you love, having that display is just sometimes so daunting for young couples that are just so scared of just the backlash of community out there. So it is a very one of those real things we just kind of, I think sometimes we glaze over a little bit and really don't pay attention that it's still a very, when it comes to race, when it comes to sexual identity, it is still a very prevalent thing, even again, a place very conservative, or not very liberal like Los Angeles and like California. So it's still crazy. So let's go on to the next one, because I'm really excited for this one, because this one's the big one that's coming out. It's going to be coming out tomorrow night. But you can go and get tickets. I'll have the link in the description for everyone to check out. But the 27th is when it's going to be opening at the, I just had a LATC, the theater down over there in downtown. You can go check it out, which will be so exciting. And it's called Members Only. It's written by you, and Okay, so this is 20 years later, both in the story and literally 20 years after you wrote Laid to the Heat. What really inspired you coming back and writing the sequel to what happened with that for members only, and kind of what inspired this next play for you on the sequel?
So I mentioned when I wrote Blade that it was around that time of Magic Johnson,
Right.
And when the play got done in New York and when it got done in LA, people read it, I think quite rightly, as an AIDS play.
Okay.
Even though it was set 20 years before there was an AIDS virus,
Right.
because it was about the sort of inhuman judgments,
Right.
the misinformation,
Right.
the cruelty, and particularly man on man
Right.
among people of color. And so I thought that perhaps these characters ought to come up to the age of AIDS.
Okay.
So 20 years after the last play ended would be roughly 1982.
Okay, so
And
right at the heat of it all, all of it's happening.
It's an exciting moment. I
Yeah.
said it in New York City. It's a moment, whether you're listening to Pat Benatar or Laurie Anderson,
Right.
or I don't know, all the good music that was of that moment. It's the dying gasp of disco, but
Yeah.
Donna Summer is still in the air.
Oh, Donna Summer's still in the air today. Oh my gosh,
And it's
that lady
the beginning of
will never
popping
die.
and locking and rapping.
Yep.
So it's this incredible transition that's
Okay.
occurring in the world. Fashion is extraordinary, and I think the word that they used in my research for what we maybe are exploring now is that they talked about unisex.
Yeah.
Unisex was a style, and it was also a way of life, and so I've got some young characters who are exploring that in the play.
Okay.
But I thought the surviving characters, 3 of them in particular, could tell me a lot about what happened in the intervening 20 years.
Mhm.
They're now in their 40s or approaching 50. I decided that the lead character, Quinn, that it would be particularly tragic, but also kind of real if he was still fighting.
Mhm.
'Cause that's way too old to fight.
I mean, for anyone almost in their 50s, I mean, that's at that time that was very unheard of.
Yeah.
Because they either had brain trauma or they're practically incapable from all the physical injuries from the past.
Exactly. Just do something else
Yeah.
at this point. Although there have been some great fighters who've lasted
True.
that long, so it's not as
True.
if it's not impossible.
It's unheard of. It's very irregular.
That's right. So I wanted him to be in this situation, and I wanted him to be in danger.
Okay.
Because when you fight at that level, as you just said, the injury can happen, and in those days there were a lot of detached retinas.
Oh, yeah.
And it was before the laser surgery
Right.
of our moment.
Right.
So you could go blind.
Oh yeah.
So that's just one of the dangers out there. But I wanted to kind of explore this really cool, exciting moment. Whether you were talking about disco,
Okay.
dance halls, or bathhouses,
Yeah.
but places where people could come together, and it was perhaps exciting, momentary, fleeting, fun, and really dangerous.
Okay.
Because the thing that people in 1982 were not necessarily aware of was that there was an as yet unnamed virus
Right.
that would eventually be known as AIDS.
Right.
So I wanted to put these characters on the cusp of this moment which changed the world. We talked about 9/11.
Yeah.
There aren't that many things bigger than 9/11,
No.
but AIDS is one of them.
Definitely one of, and especially for the LGBT community. I mean, that demographic was very much the first that kind of really experienced that lash from HIV and AIDS. And really, it was also to this kind of a whole identity kind of expression. I mean, it's kind of similar to like the 50s and 60s of this called the age of love kind of thing, where they're still exploring and figuring things out and kind of being fluid with everything. And I felt like it came back in the 80s a little bit, and then the AIDS epidemic hit, and that kind of squelted that a little bit.
It did.
And then now, 2018, we're kind of getting back again to that kind of age of love of sexual identity, sexual expression. I mean, gender is becoming a new concept and what people are really choosing to identify and choose to explore with that. So I really feel like it's like almost 20-year kind of lull. It's happened this is the third round in my kind of demographic of understanding this. So you're kind of pulling this on, and so how are you relating 1982 to 2018 and trying to draw parallels so that people can kind of come in here for someone even at my age who's born in the 80s, being able to kind of relate and kind of go in to see this, and how do I pull in like, oh my gosh, I totally get what the lead character is going through, and especially with this self-discovery, trying to live his life on his own terms, whether it's in the ring or out of it. How do you kind of tie in the two from the 80s to today?
Yeah, that's the history mystery thing, because in their moment, I mean, they don't realize how quaint it is to talk about Pat Benatar or whoever else. Or Donna Summer's never quaint, but still, you're in, if you listening to 80s radio on FM or whatever, people do that because it's fun and a little goofy. But at the time, it was the air that we were breathing.
Right.
So they didn't know that they were in an epoch. They just were
They were just there. Right.
Yeah, so I feel that's the way we are when we come into a theater and we've got a million things going on, and then the lights go down and then we enter into a story. Is we don't quite lose all that baggage that we brought in with us, but hopefully the story takes us somewhere else.
Okay.
And when we leave, even if it's in the intermission, certainly afterwards, we're slightly altered. And it might affect everything that came before. Not just the story we saw, but maybe the way we're feeling about our partner or our job, or perhaps something even bigger than that, Trump, or something that we need to do with our lives. So I was, the strategy here is to kind of deal with this moment that is historical, that you have data on, but be really curious. Not using the language of 2018,
Gotcha.
Which is cisgender this or all that other stuff,
or non-binary, all this other stuff. Okay.
But to deal with the same urge.
Got it.
And to deal with the same desire to kind of define yourself.
Okay.
And so Quinn, who is this lonely warrior who has kind of been, beset with the guilt of that first play. Has a lot more options than he used to have.
Okay.
He frequents the bathhouse. He has a very kind of a full gay lifestyle, except he's not out.
Right. It's still, that's still very much the 80s, though. I mean, you knew, but you didn't talk about it, or you really didn't say. It was kind of like a don't ask, don't tell.
We know it's still happening now, too.
Yeah, true.
And so if that's a download thing or whatever that is, and I think you have to respect people for the choices that they feel they must make.
Right.
Although obviously, again, politically,
yeah.
maybe would hope that we come together and
yes.
celebrate who we are.
Exactly. Well, and that's getting harder and harder, especially with the whole our transgender
yes.
brothers and sisters and everything going on with that issue right now. Which, if you have a transgender friend, give them a hug and really sit there and stand in support of anything you can do.
But what you just said is another reason why, when we look at this moment where it's like so kind of hard-edged
yeah.
and painful and cruel, and we think about our own moment,
yeah.
which has which could go in that direction.
Right.
If things don't work out for us,
right,
and there's no promise that they will.
Exactly.
That we're going to have to deal with, hopefully it won't be that bad, but it'll be bad enough that people we love are going to be in danger.
Yeah.
And we have to protect them.
Yeah.
So I think that when people come to this play, hopefully they're going to dig the music.
Yeah.
It's going to be sexy and fun and violent and all that stuff that we like and romantic and have a twist. But it's also going to be it's going to make them come home and think about the people they love and protecting them. And as you say, hugging them and trying to get through something that's bigger than we are.
Right. And I really love how you kind of round out right now Quinn's story of it being kind of a mirror to the audience and kind of giving people this look at to whether they're open, whether they're still in the closet, whatever is affecting their day-to-day lifestyle and whatever that fear may be, whatever their inner demons are, that they need to keep loving each other and keep loving one another and still trying to live to their full potential. And you're really kind of giving him this kind of growth in that aspect of, even though he's still not quite going the full, he's not wearing a pride flag or anything crazy like that out in his perspective, but still he's come to terms with his identity. He's still living his life, but still trying to make sure he carries that through.
That's right.
And I really like and I like the fact that it's, again, not just a few years later, not that the fact that it is 20 years later, it really kind of has developed this kind of growth through a lifespan and really pulling him in from this younger distinction to his older self.
I like to think it's a trial by fire.
Okay.
The first play was called Blade to the Heat, and it's a cool title.
Yeah.
But it kind of means, when you put a knife edge, a blade of one kind to fire, depending on the amalgam of the metal in it, it'll either get stronger
or
it'll break.
Yeah. Another vocab word, amalgam. I'm going to be doing dictionary searches through the rest of this video, just so you know. And then, so why the title members only then? Since that's
Cool jacket.
Cool jacket. I do have a members only jacket, actually.
You should wear it when you come.
I should do that. Oh my
Please
god.
do. I'll wear mine too.
Yeah. And so can we expect to see a trilogy in this? Okay, so there might be a third, or there more than likely will be a third in this Set Quinn trilogy.
Well, no
And-
delusions of grandeur, but you know the Greek playwrights often did their plays in three.
True. Yeah. Most everything is done in threes for sure. Yeah.
And Orestes,
Yeah.
and you know these great plays of the long ago. They took their time going through a human life.
Right.
And it seems to me that that's worthy.
And you need to, quite frankly. I mean, any kind of good story needs good development, and especially if you're doing a kind of an evolution of a character, you need not just a few years, and you need a lifespan. And so, what can you give us a peek into the direction you might have for what the final might look like?
First off, I'll say I haven't written a word yet.
Right.
So
in your
this could
head, like
Yeah.
what's your overall idea?
And I don't want to give away some of the plot points
right.
of the play that we're just about to open. But this play is, if anything, I think it's more violent and exciting, and deals with an attempt at redemption for somebody who's walking around with a lot of guilt and
Right, because he killed a man in the first one.
Yes,
right.
he did, and 20 years later, that hasn't washed away.
Yeah.
Nor do I think it ever could.
I don't think you could with something. Taking a life. I mean, no one can ever say, unless you're a sociopath. No one can really ever say.
There's probably someone out there who's like, oh, that's fine, but the rest of us know that that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And yet in this play, I'm really trying to achieve a redemption, but I realize, you know, I have a cast of 8 characters, that it's maybe even as one achieves redemption, another one may lose a fight.
Wow.
That is, you know, it may not be their life, but in a lot of ways it might as well be just as bad.
Okay.
And particularly at a moment where, you know, out of all the 8 people on stage, they're all sexually active.
Wow.
You know, and they all have secrets, and boy, they all have desires, and they're all scared about them.
Yeah.
So I look for the third play to see who survived this play.
Gotcha.
Because that's the same thing I did between the first and
That's
second
true.
one.
You only
They
have
don't all
3.
make it.
You only have 3 that have carried on through this one.
Exactly. So in this time, I think it'll be fascinating to see who has made it through the scourge of AIDS,
Okay.
who has made it through this sort of trial by fire that happens in members only, and if indeed redemption can even be possible. Maybe a moment's redemption occurs in this one, but if that can carry over, you know, I mean, now I'm getting into all these Catholic words like absolution,
Right.
Trying to cleanse yourself
Right.
from a lifetime of worry and regret and guilt. You know, it sounds like I'm some kind of like, you know, I don't know, like I'm racked with this myself, and most of the day I go around really happy, but I think I do know, I think we know people like that, even if we're not like that ourselves. It might be our parents or an uncle or a brother or a sister, and maybe occasionally it's even us. You know, we got things we're not proud of.
Right.
And we do our darndest to live better, to do better, to be more loving to people. You know, but you can't undo the past.
Yeah.
Can you?
On a scale for the timeline wise, since you've done this one almost 20 years later from the first end of the trilogy, where do you see timeline falling for the third? Do you see it 20 years in the future, or do you see it fairly close?
That would take it to 2002, which would be pretty interesting.
Okay.
But I do think that when you get to the end of this play, you'll see that something happens that demands we want to know more.
Okay.
And that it really involves characters that I hope, the audience will have grown to love. So that I need to answer that.
Okay.
But, so I don't know if I'm
You're
going
not
to be as
100%.
schematic,
Okay.
taking it 2020.
Gotcha.
I think I'd like, honestly, probably to get us up into the 90s.
Okay.
What I really do enjoy, and I think you put your finger on it, is I do like to take an historical moment or a period and kind of bring it back to life.
Okay.
In a weird way, that's my job. I bring the dead back to life as a playwright.
That's true.
You know, I dedicate a play to maybe someone I've never even met, or else someone that I've met and lost, and I try to bring them back. I get an actor, I get some people to relight the stage, and a good director, and before you know it, their spirit is back.
That's amazing.
And obviously it's a version. It's not, again, it's not some kind of document, or it's not some kind of DNA, but maybe it's just as good.
Yeah, and so I'll put everything in the description so that way you guys can go and purchase your tickets. It's going to be October 27th through November 18th, and you guys can go and check that out at LATC and go and check it out and support your local theater community. Duh. I mean, it's always fun to really get out of the house, take a friend, take your husband or wife, and go have a night on the town. And it's something that really, I think, will captivate your heart. Really, I mean, definitely tug at your heartstrings for sure. And just really kind of help you guys think of something different that's really, I mean, very correlates a lot to today's age. So I'll put that in the description for members only. And then just like one piece of advice you could give young playwrights out there that are just kind of struggling with the concept of coming up with, not just coming up with like writing or with a play, but really hitting on topics that might be a little bit controversial or someone might think might just be a little too far out of the box. Since you do kind of hit on some plays like that, especially with this topic, what kind of advice would you give to them if they're trying to kind of come to grips with someone telling them about controversial topics?
I would first go with what you love.
Go with what you love? Okay.
Deeply with what you love, but really ask yourself, what do you really love?
Yeah.
And be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be kind of an intimate question and maybe a very revealing, and you feel like you're naked, and that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Do it, and then go for it. And I think what I often do is when I've identified where my love is going. I think all the best stories are love stories.
Yeah.
And even when it's not obvious where the love is, like there's a lot of violence, or there's a lot of it's wartime or whatever. But the thing that we glom onto, the thing that we remember, in like Casablanca, which is in the middle of the World War II and all the immigration, is the love story.
Right.
So I do think you want to remember wherever your heart, kind of opens.
Yeah.
That's where you want to put the bulk of your writing.
Okay.
And that's where you want to create your characters, but you have to put them in jeopardy.
Gotcha.
You have to consider, in your life, I don't want your loved ones to be in any jeopardy, but on the page, I think you have to always imagine that you might lose them.
Yeah.
And also perhaps in an unjust way.
Okay.
Unless you fight.
Yeah.
And so I think that each page you write, whatever you're on, whatever word processor you might be on, that you're dealing with, that there's a fight involved, that it's worth fighting for, and that's again a good reason why to go with your passion and your love, because if you do that, you are going to fight. You're not going to give up easy. You're not going to go down easy.
Right.
And you might find after a series of pages that you got more to say. So many of us, when we write, we have some initial idea, and then we're like, geez, that's all it is? But if you're kind of mainlining those important things that make you who you are, that make other people fall in love with you, and perhaps find shared pursuits and shared passions, well, that can take you over the course of the play, and maybe over the course of 3 plays.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's amazing. I mean, seriously, one food for thought. And honestly, always stay true to yourself. I mean, never let anyone dictate you to you. I mean, it is your own life. You only have one life to live, so live it out.
Well,
thank you, Oliver. I really appreciate you coming and speaking with us today. Go check out Members Only at LATC from October 27th through November 18th. It's going to be a lot of fun and supporting your local play community. We want to say thank you very much to GayLifeLA.com for the amazing producers, as well as King Rose Apartment Homes that you see here today. My name is Enoch Miller, Empress West Hollywood, and we'll check out next week. Bye, everyone. Thank you.